It was supposed to be a simple day, one that millions of 13-year-olds had experienced before. Maya Davis, a confident, eager teenager, had finally saved up enough money to open her very first checking account, a milestone that signified maturity and independence. Her mother, Dr. Evelyn Davis, had raised her to be responsible, kind, and grounded, despite the wealth and power their family held. Maya had followed all the steps, gathered the paperwork, prepared the documents, and walked into Silverstone Bank with a feeling of excitement and pride. But what Maya didn't expect was to be accused of something so outrageous that it would change the course of her life forever. She hadn't done anything wrong. She hadn't broken any rules. Yet, before she even stepped up to the counter, Maya was already being judged. She was 13, standing with a perfectly neat envelope of birthday money, savings from her chores and gift from family, excited to take this next step in her life. What she didn't know was that her dreams of independence were about to be crushed by the weight of prejudice. Maya approached the counter with a friendly smile, ready to take the next step toward financial freedom. She had worked hard for every dollar she had saved and was eager to take control of her own finances. What should have been an exciting moment turned into a nightmare when the bank employee, a middle-aged woman named Sharon Mitchell, looked at her with a sneer, a mixture of suspicion and disdain clouding her eyes. "What do you want?" Sharon's voice was sharp, her tone cold. It felt like a slap to Maya's face. She had barely opened her mouth to explain when Sharon cut her off. "You know, kids like you don't usually walk into a bank with this much money. How did you get it?" Sharon's tone was accusatory, harsh, and judgmental, as though Maya were a criminal before she had even spoken a word. Maya blinked, her heart suddenly racing. She hadn't expected this kind of treatment. She was just a girl excited to open her first account. Was it because of her age? Or was there something deeper behind Sharon's suspicion? Maya thought back to her mom's constant reminders about the importance of presenting herself with respect, being polite, and working hard to be seen as an equal. It seemed like all that effort had been undone in a moment. "I'm just here to open a checking account," Maya replied nervously, trying to keep her composure. "I've been saving for months, and this is for my birthday money and savings from doing chores." Sharon didn't respond with warmth or understanding. Instead, she scrutinized Maya's envelope, narrowing her eyes. "Birthday money? From whom?" she asked dismissively. "My grandmother and the rest I've been saving," Maya said, trying her best to sound confident, though her voice was shaky. "I have all the paperwork right here." But Sharon wasn't listening. She barely glanced at the paperwork, instead growing more agitated with each passing second. "I don't think so. Kids like you don't just walk into a bank with this much cash. There's something fishy about this." Maya's face flushed with a mixture of embarrassment and disbelief. She couldn't believe what was happening. She was being treated like a criminal, like she didn't belong in that bank. She tried to stay calm, but she couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. It wasn't just the tone of Sharon's voice. It was the way she looked at Maya, as though she was somehow beneath her, undeserving of the same treatment as other customers. Before Maya could respond, Sharon picked up the phone, her eyes still fixed on Maya, making no attempt to hide her judgment. "I need to speak to the manager." "I think we got a problem," Sharon said, her voice dripping with suspicion. A cold knot formed in Maya's stomach. She didn't know what was happening, but her instinct told her that this wasn't going to end well. She tried to explain that she hadn't done anything wrong, that this was her money, that she was just a kid trying to do something responsible. But Sharon wasn't listening. Sharon had already made up her mind. The manager, a woman named Sharon Mitchell, arrived minutes later. Her gaze swept over Maya like she was an object to be inspected, scrutinized for anything that could be deemed out of place. "What's going on here?" the manager asked, her tone sharp and unforgiving. "She's trying to deposit stolen money," Sharon Mitchell said with a smug smile, looking at Maya with a sense of satisfaction. "I've been in banking long enough to know suspicious activity when I see it. A kid like this with cash? I don't think so." Maya's heart sank. She tried to explain, tried to tell them that it was all legitimate, that this was her savings and that her grandmother had given her money for her birthday. But none of it mattered. The manager's eyes were cold, and she wasn't even interested in hearing Maya out. She didn't look at the paperwork, didn't ask to see the details of Maya's savings. Instead, she assumed the worst. "You're a thief," the manager sneered. "I'm calling the police." The words hit Maya like a punch to the gut. She stood there in shock, unable to comprehend how quickly everything had escalated. She had just wanted to open an account, to prove that she was responsible, to take a step into adulthood. But instead, she was being treated like a criminal, accused of stealing money she had earned honestly. As the manager dialed the police, Maya's mind raced. She hadn't done anything wrong. She couldn't believe this was happening to her, but there she stood, trapped in a nightmare. And just when she thought things couldn't get worse, she realized there was no one there to defend her. No one would speak up for her. The bank staff, the customers, everyone was just watching as she was dragged further into a nightmare of accusations and injustice. In the back of her mind, Maya remembered the lessons her mother had taught her about standing up for what's right, about not letting people treat you like you don't matter. But at that moment, in that bank, those lessons seemed powerless against the overwhelming force of bias and prejudice. The police arrived soon after. The officers didn't question Maya or ask for any clarification. They didn't give her a chance to explain. They simply walked over, looked at her, and without a word, started to place handcuffs around her wrists. Maya was in complete shock. She had gone from being an excited young girl about to open a checking account to being treated like a criminal in mere minutes. But there, in the midst of the panic, one thought pushed through confusion and fear. This wasn't right. And that was the thought that would change everything. Maya didn't know it yet, but her life was about to take a drastic turn. She was about to experience something that millions of others faced every day, the brutal reality of racial profiling, and the struggle that comes with fighting back against a system designed to keep people like her down. And for the first time in her life, Maya understood the painful truth. She wasn't just a victim of a misunderstanding. Maya sat in the back of the police car, her hands still cuffed, her mind racing with disbelief. She had never felt so powerless in her life. The moment the handcuffs clicked shut, a heavy silence had settled over her. She couldn't process it. She couldn't understand how something so simple, so innocent, could have turned into this nightmare. This wasn't supposed to happen to her. She wasn't some criminal. She was just a 13-year-old girl trying to open a checking account. The money she had wasn't stolen. It was from birthday gifts, saved up over time, money she had worked for by doing chores around the house. She had earned every dollar. And yet, there she was, sitting in a police car, the doors locked, the world outside buzzing past her like it didn't even matter. The officer sitting in the front seat didn't speak to her. Neither of them did. The silence in the car was suffocating, filled only by the sound of her breathing and the occasional hum of the engine. She felt invisible, not in the way she had hoped, like an ordinary teen going about her business, but in the most painful sense of the word. She was invisible to the officers, to the system, to everyone who had decided, within minutes of meeting her, that she wasn't worthy of being heard. Her thoughts went back to the moment when the manager, Sharon Mitchell, had called the police. Maya's stomach twisted as she remembered Sharon's words. She's probably just trying to deposit stolen money. The way she had said it with such cold finality, the sneer on her face, like she was certain Maya was guilty. Maya had tried to show her the paperwork, the proof of everything she was saying, but Sharon had dismissed her. It was as if she had already made up her mind about who Maya was, simply because of the color of her skin. Maya had never felt anything like this before, never been made to feel like she was less than anyone else. Her mother, Dr. Evelyn Davis, had worked hard to shield her from such things. She had been raised in an environment where she was taught to believe in fairness, in justice, in doing the right thing. Maya had been taught that if you worked hard, followed the rules, and treated people with respect, the world would treat you the same way in return. But here she was handcuffed, her heart racing with confusion, fear, and a sense of betrayal. How could this happen? Why her? The car rolled to a stop at the police station, and Maya was led inside, her hands still cupped behind her back. It felt like the longest walk of her life. She could feel eyes on her from every direction, eyes that didn't see a young girl with a bright future, but a suspect, a potential criminal. She wanted to scream, to tell them all that they were wrong, that this was a huge mistake. But her voice was lost in the chaos of the moment. As she sat in the cold, sterile holding room, waiting for the officers to process her, Maya felt the weight of everything pressed down on her chest. Her thoughts raced, but they were jumbled. She couldn't think straight. How was she going to explain this to her mother? How was she going to explain to her that she had been treated like a criminal accused of stealing money? Maya's mind flashed the look of shock and horror her mother would have when she found out what was happening to the world. Why were people so quick to judge? Why was she being treated like a criminal just because of the way she looked? Suddenly, her phone buzzed. It was a message from her mom. "Maya, where are you? You were supposed to meet me at the bank. Everything okay?" Maya's breath hitched in her throat. Her mother had no idea what was going on. The shock she would feel when she found out. Maya couldn't bear it. She quickly typed a response, her fingers trembling on the screen. "Mom, I'm at the police station. They think I stole the money. Please help me." Her heart pounded as she sent the message. She stared at the screen, waiting for her mother's reply, but it didn't come immediately. Time seemed to stretch on forever. The seconds ticked by painfully, each one heavier than the last. Finally, the phone buzzed again. "I'm on my way. Don't worry, I'll be there soon. Everything will be fine. I'm coming to get you." Maya felt a small wave of relief. Her mother was coming. Dr. Evelyn Davis had always been there for her, strong, determined, and unshakable. If anyone could fix this, it was her. She had the power to make things right. But even with her mother's reassuring message, Maya couldn't shake the fear that gripped her. She was a child, a 13-year-old girl, caught in a system that didn't care about her story, her truth, or her innocence. Moments later, the door to the holding room opened, and one of the officers entered. He glanced at her, his eyes cold but professional. "You're free to go," he said, unlocking the cuffs from her wrists. Maya didn't say anything. She didn't even look at him as she rubbed her sore wrists. The silence in the room felt suffocating. When she was released into the hallway, her mother was already waiting for her. Dr. Evelyn Davis was standing tall, her face composed but filled with concern. She had that familiar look in her eyes, the one that told Maya she was ready to take on the world, ready to fight for her. "Mom," Maya whispered as she ran toward her mother, throwing her arms around her. Evelyn hugged her tightly, offering comfort and warmth. "It's okay, sweetheart," Evelyn said softly, her voice steady. "We'll get through this." But even as Maya felt the safety of her mother's embrace, she couldn't escape the question that lingered in her mind. What had just happened to her? Why had this woman, this stranger, treated her like she was guilty? Maya didn't have the answers yet, but she knew one thing for sure. This wasn't over. It couldn't be. She wouldn't let it be. With her mother by her side, Maya knew that the battle wasn't just about clearing her name. It was about something bigger. It was about making sure that this kind of injustice didn't happen to anyone else. As they walked out of the station, Maya's thoughts shifted. She was scared. She was angry. But more than that, she was determined. This wasn't just a mistake. This was a system that needed to change. And Maya Davis was going to be part of that change. Was a symbol of something much larger. The drive home was quiet, the air thick with unspoken words. Maya sat in the passenger seat, staring out the window, her mind still reeling from everything that had just happened. It felt like the world was moving at a pace she couldn't keep up with, like everything she thought she knew about fairness and justice had suddenly crumbled into dust. How could someone so confidently accuse her of something she didn't do? She wasn't a criminal. She was a kid trying to do something responsible. But it felt like none of that mattered. Beside her, Evelyn Davis, her mother, was silent too. But Maya could feel the tension in the air. She could feel her mother's anger, the rage simmering just beneath the surface. Evelyn was a woman who had built an entire career from nothing, someone who had learned to stand her ground and fight for what was right. Maya had always looked up to her mother. She was strong, capable, and unwavering in her beliefs. And yet, even Evelyn seemed stunned by the unfairness of what had just transpired. Maya could feel the weight of the day pressing down on her shoulders, but she knew one thing for sure. This wasn't over. It couldn't be. "Maya," Evelyn said, her voice low and steady, "I'm going to make sure this doesn't happen again. No one gets to treat you like that. I don't care who they are, what their title is, or how much power they think they have. This stops now." Maya turned to look at her mother, the words sinking in. She had always trusted her mom to take care of things, to make sure everything was okay. But this felt different. The reality of the situation had set in. This wasn't just about what had happened to her today. It was bigger than that. This was about something systemic, something that affected countless other people. Maya knew she wasn't the only one who had been treated unfairly, accused, or judged because of her race. She wasn't the first, and she certainly wouldn't be the last. But as the car slowed down and they approached home, Maya made a decision. She wouldn't let this go. She would speak out. She would fight. She didn't know exactly how or what steps she needed to take, but she knew that she had to do something. She had to turn the injustice she had just experienced into a force for change. Later that evening, after they had settled in at home, Evelyn sat down with Maya in the living room. Maya had already changed into her pajamas, but her mind was still racing. She couldn't shake the feeling of helplessness, the frustration of being misjudged. But she also couldn't ignore the anger she felt, the anger at how quickly the situation had escalated, how quickly people had decided she was guilty without giving her a chance. "Maya," Evelyn said, her voice steady but filled with resolve, "I know you're angry, and I don't blame you. What happened to you today was wrong. But what I need you to understand is that this moment, as painful as it is, can be the catalyst for something bigger." Maya turned to look at her mom. "What do you mean?" Evelyn leaned forward, her hands resting on her knees. "I mean that this is your opportunity to make a difference. This wasn't just a mistake. This is a reflection of a much bigger issue. You've experienced something that millions of other people experience every day. Discrimination, racial profiling, unfair treatment. And if we don't speak out, if we don't take action, nothing will change." Maya's heart raced as the weight of her mother's words hit her. She had been so focused on clearing her name, on just getting out of this nightmare, that she hadn't considered the bigger picture. But now, as she looked at her mother, she could see it, the passion in her eyes, the unwavering belief that this could be the beginning of something important. "I don't know if I'm ready for this, Mom," Maya whispered, her voice shaky. "What if people don't believe me? What if I can't make a difference?" Evelyn's smile was warm, but firm. "Maya, you are ready. And you don't have to do this alone. You've already done something incredible today. You've shown strength. You've shown that you won't let them define you. And that's where real change starts. It starts with one person standing up, saying this isn't right. And that person can inspire others to do the same. You have a voice, Maya, and it matters." Maya sat back on the couch, her mind whirling. Her mother was right. She did have a voice. She had always been taught to speak up for what she believed in, to fight for fairness, and to never back down in the face of injustice. This was her moment to put all those lessons into action. This wasn't just about clearing her name anymore. It was about making sure that no one else had to go through what she had experienced. It was about standing up for every person who had been unjustly treated because of the color of their skin, the way they looked, or where they came from. "I'll do it, Mom," Maya said, her voice filled with newfound determination. "I'm going to make sure people know what happened, and I'm going to make sure they know how wrong it is." Evelyn nodded, her eyes shining with pride. "I knew you'd say that. We'll start small, but we'll make a difference. And remember, I'll be here with you every step of the way." The next morning, Maya woke up with a sense of purpose she hadn't had before. She didn't know where to start, but she knew that she had to do something. She couldn't just sit back and let things slide. She had to use her experience to raise awareness about what happened and to fight against the injustice she had faced. Over the next few days, Maya reached out to local organizations that worked on racial justice and civil rights. She contacted lawyers, activists, and educators, asking for advice on how she could start making a difference. She spent hours reading about racial profiling, discrimination, and the history of injustice in her community. And with each new piece of information, Maya's resolve grew stronger. She wasn't just a victim of a mistaken assumption. She was a part of a much larger fight for fairness, equality, and justice. She also started sharing her story on social media, posting about her experience at Silverstone Bank, the way she had been treated, and how quickly people had assumed the worst about her. The response was overwhelming. Messages poured in from people all over the country. People who had faced the same thing. People who had been treated unfairly simply because of their race. Maya realized with a start that her story wasn't unique. It was one of millions. And with each message, each new voice joining the conversation, Maya knew that she was no longer alone. She had a community behind her, a community of people who understood her pain and were ready to fight alongside her for change. Her journey had only just begun. Maya sat at her desk, scrolling through her phone, reading all the comments, messages, and shares of her social media post about what had happened to her at Silverstone Bank. She had shared her story the night after she had been released from the police station, still reeling from the shock. At first, she had just posted a simple update about what had happened, never expecting it to gain much attention, but the response was overwhelming. Her inbox was filled with messages of support from people all around the world. Young people, activists, and even adults who had been through similar situations. She was flooded with stories of people who had been discriminated against, treated unfairly, or falsely accused of crimes just because of their appearance. Maya realized something powerful in that moment. She wasn't just telling her story. She was opening up a conversation that millions of people had been too afraid or too hurt to have. The more she read, the more she understood that what had happened to her wasn't just an isolated incident. It was part of a much larger problem, a systemic issue that stretched beyond her personal experience and touched countless lives. And in that moment, Maya knew that this wasn't just about clearing her name. This was about something bigger, something that could help others, something that could push for real change. Sitting at her desk, Maya felt a sense of clarity wash over her. She needed to do more than just post on social media. She needed to take action. She needed to make sure that the voices of those who had been silenced by racial profiling and discrimination were heard. She had to build something that would amplify those voices and create a movement that could push for real, lasting change. Maya, Evelyn's voice cut through her thoughts. Maya looked up to see her mother standing in the doorway, a look of quiet determination on her face. Evelyn had been by her side every step of the way, but Maya could see the worry in her eyes. She knew that her mother was just as anxious as she was about what had happened. But there was also a spark in Evelyn's gaze, one that Maya knew meant her mom was ready to fight this battle with her. "I think it's time we take this to the next level," Maya said, standing up and turning to face her mother. "This is bigger than just me. It's about all the people who have been treated like I was. People who are unfairly judged, who are profiled, who are seen as less than because of how they look." Evelyn nodded, her face softening with pride. "I think you're right, Maya. You've already started something by sharing your story. But now, it's time to give it more structure, more direction. We need to turn this into something that people can rally behind." "I know," Maya replied. "But how do we start? Where do we even begin?" Evelyn smiled, walking over to her daughter and placing a hand on her shoulder. "First, you need to decide what you want to accomplish. What's the message you want to send? What do you want people to take away from this?" Maya thought for a moment, staring out the window at the city below. There was so much she wanted to change, so much she wanted to fix. But she knew it had to start with something simple, something that could be understood by everyone. It wasn't just about calling out racism. It was about teaching people how to recognize it, how to fight back against it, and how to stand up for one another. "I want to create a platform where young people can learn about their rights," Maya said finally. "A place where they can understand what to do when they're discriminated against. A place where they can find the courage to speak up. I want them to know they're not alone." Evelyn's eyes lit up. "That's a powerful idea, Maya. And you don't have to do it alone. You've already got the support of the people who've been following your story. You can turn that support into something tangible. We can build an organization, a movement that empowers people to take action." The words felt like a lifeline to Maya. For the first time since everything had happened, she felt like she could do something. She wasn't just sitting in the passenger seat anymore. She was in control of her future, of the future of countless other young people who had experienced the same kind of injustice. With her mother's help, Maya began to outline her vision. She would start by creating a website, a central hub where young people could learn about their legal rights, share their experiences, and access resources that would help them fight back against discrimination. Maya also wanted to create a space for storytelling, a place where people could speak about their experiences without fear of being judged or silenced. But Maya knew that she couldn't do this alone. She needed to gather a team of like-minded people who shared her passion for change, people who were willing to stand up and speak out against injustice. So, Maya began reaching out to activists, educators, and legal experts, people who could help guide her mission and lend their expertise. She started attending local community meetings, connected with other young leaders, and listening to their stories. Each conversation, she had reaffirmed the urgency of her cause. Within weeks, Voices of Change was born, a movement fueled by the passion and determination of young people who had had enough. It wasn't just Maya's fight anymore. It was everyone's fight. They would no longer remain silent. They would no longer allow themselves to be treated as less than. They were going to demand their rights. And they were going to do it together. Maya had spent so much of her life trying to fit into the mold of what others expected of her. She had been taught to be polite, to follow the rules, to blend in. But now, she realized blending in wasn't enough. She had to stand out. She had to raise her voice and make sure people heard it. The movement grew faster than Maya had ever expected. Voices of Change wasn't just a local initiative anymore. It had spread to other cities, other schools, other communities. And as the movement grew, so did Maya's confidence. She had found her purpose. And with every step she took, she felt the weight of the injustice she had experienced turning into something powerful. She was no longer just fighting for herself. She was fighting for every person who had ever been wronged, who had ever been made to feel inferior simply because of the way they looked. But as the movement gained momentum, Maya knew that the real work was just beginning. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. There would be setbacks, challenges, and people who tried to silence them. But Maya was ready. She had something they couldn't take from her, a voice. And with that voice, Maya knew she could change the world. IT was supposed to be a simple mistake, right? A misunderstanding. After all, Maya was just a 13-year-old girl, one of thousands opening her first checking account. She didn't think it would be a big deal. She had worked hard for that money. Every dollar, every penny she had earned came from chores, birthday gifts, and savings. She was ready. But little did she know, what started as an innocent visit to the bank would ignite a fire inside her, a fire that would change her life and the lives of others forever. The moment she stepped into Silverstone Bank that day, Maya was met with judgment, suspicion, and a swift assumption about who she was based solely on the color of her skin. They didn't ask her about her background or give her the benefit of the doubt. They didn't even listen to her explanation. Instead, they treated her like a criminal. They judged her by appearances, wrote her off as nothing more than another urban kid trying to pull off a scam. Maya had never been so humiliated in her life. She had tried to speak, tried to explain, but the words got caught in her throat as the bank manager called the police. In that moment, as the officers cuffed her hands and let her out of the bank like she was some hardened criminal, Maya understood something she had never realized before. This wasn't just about her. This wasn't about one mistake or one bad day. This was about a system that made assumptions based on skin color, that judged people like her before they even had the chance to speak. Maya was just one face in a sea of many, all facing the same unjust treatment. But Maya wasn't just going to be another statistic. No, she wasn't going to let the world define her. This wasn't going to be the end of her story. It was the beginning. They will never treat me like this again. Those were the words that echoed in Maya's mind as she sat in the police car, still reeling from what had just happened. She couldn't believe it. Her whole world had turned upside down in the span of one afternoon. But in that moment, a shift happened inside her. The injustice, the unfairness, the humiliation, none of it was her fault. She was not guilty. She wasn't just a girl being treated unfairly. She was a force that was about to rise. She was going to change things. And she was going to start with her own story. Maya, Evelyn's calm voice broke her out of her thoughts as they drove home. It's not over. You hear me? This is not the end. Maya turned her head and met her mother's eyes. Evelyn's gaze was firm, strong, like always, but there was a tenderness in it now, one that made Maya's heart swell. Her mother had always taught her to fight for what was right, to stand up against injustice, to use her voice. And now, Maya realized it was time to do exactly that. But, Mom, they treated me like I was guilty. Like I was just a criminal, Maya whispered, her voice cracking with emotion. I've never been treated like that before. Evelyn's hand gripped the steering wheel tighter, but her voice remained calm, steady. I know, and it's wrong, Maya, but we're going to make sure that this never happens to anyone else. You're not alone in this. There are millions of people who have been treated like you, like criminals, when they've done nothing wrong. We can't let that continue. Maya looked out the window, watching the world pass by, but her mind was already racing. There was a fire burning inside her now, a need to do something, to make a difference. This couldn't just be about her. This couldn't just be a moment she would let fade into the background. She had to fight back. She had to show people that this wasn't just a random event. It was part of something bigger. Her mind flashed to the messages she had received after posting about the incident on social media. Hundreds of messages, thousands of people, all sharing their own stories of being judged, of being treated like criminals simply because of the way they looked. It wasn't just her. It was a cycle that had been repeating itself for years, decades, centuries. Maya wasn't just a victim here. She was a spark. And now, it was her turn to light the fire. If I don't speak up now, who will? The next few days were a blur for Maya. As she scrolled through her phone, her inbox was filled with messages from strangers, activists, and others who had experienced the same kind of profiling and discrimination. The response was staggering. People from all walks of life were sharing their own stories, offering their support, and calling for change. Maya realized that her story wasn't unique. It was part of a larger, broken system that affected so many, and she couldn't just stand by and watch it continue. But there was something more. Maya didn't just want to share her story. She wanted to change things. She wanted to make sure that people who went through the same experiences knew their rights, knew how to fight back, and knew they weren't alone. And so, with the support of her mother and a few trusted friends, Maya decided to take action. She wasn't just going to be a voice in the crowd. She was going to build a movement, one that would give others the courage to speak out, to fight for what was right. She didn't know exactly how to start, but she knew she had to begin somewhere. And as she began outlining her plan, she realized one thing. This was bigger than just her. It was about every person who had ever been denied fairness, every person who had ever been silenced, every person who had been made to feel small. Maya decided to create an online platform, Voices of Change, a place where young people could come together, share their stories, find legal resources, and educate themselves about their rights. She would use her experience to build something that would empower others. Maya wasn't just a victim. She was a fighter, and she was going to help other people become fighters too. Her first step was reaching out to local organizations that focused on racial justice and activism. She began attending meetings, networking with activists, and speaking with educators about how to build a program that would help people understand what racial profiling was, how to fight back, and how to stand up for themselves. The support she received was overwhelming. Maya wasn't alone in this. She had the backing of a community, people who believed in her mission and in the power of her voice. As Voices of Change started to take shape, Maya also began speaking at local schools and community centers, sharing her story and explaining the importance of standing up against injustice. With every person she spoke to, every hand she shook, Maya felt the weight of her mission growing stronger. She was no longer just a victim. She was a catalyst for change. We're not just speaking for ourselves, Maya said at a community meeting one evening. We're speaking for everyone who's been wronged, who's been judged before they even had the chance to explain themselves. We're speaking for every person who's ever been made to feel like they don't belong. The room erupted in applause. Maya's heart raced as the crowd cheered, but she knew that the applause wasn't for her. It was for all the voices that had been silenced for too long. It was for every person who had been judged, discriminated against, and forced to prove their worth over and over again. This was just the beginning. But Maya knew one thing. The fight for justice was far from over. And with every step she took, with every story shared, and with every person who joined the movement, she felt the power of change begin to spread. The spark had been lit. Now, it was time to watch the fire grow. Maya had always known her voice was powerful, but she had never truly understood its potential until that moment. When she started sharing her story online, she never expected it to spread as quickly as it did. But with every post, every tweet, and every comment, voices of change began to grow. It was no longer just about her. It was about everyone who had ever been denied fairness, everyone who had ever been judged without a chance, everyone who had ever been told they didn't matter. As the days passed, Maya began to feel the weight of what she had started. It wasn't just a platform anymore. It was a movement, a cause that had taken on a life of its own. People from all over the country were reaching out to her, sharing their stories of discrimination, of unfair treatment. She was overwhelmed, not by the attention she was getting, but by the number of people who had faced the same kind of injustice. The support was humbling, but it also made Maya realize just how deeply embedded the issue of racial profiling and discrimination was in society. This wasn't just a one-time event at a bank. This was a problem that affected millions of people every day. She had spent most of her life thinking that her world was fair, that if she worked hard and followed the rules, things would go her way. But that illusion had been shattered the moment she had been accused of theft simply because of the way she looked. The moment she was treated like a criminal by people who didn't even know her, based solely on assumptions, stereotypes, and bias. Maya wasn't going to let this be the end of her story. She knew that this was bigger than just her personal experience. It was about raising awareness, educating people, and pushing for real change. She wasn't going to be just a victim. She was going to be a voice for others who had been silenced, a voice for those who had never had the chance to speak out. But as voices of change grew, Maya realized the fight wasn't going to be easy. There would be resistance. There would be people who didn't want to hear the truth, people who were comfortable with the status quo, and didn't want to challenge the systems that allowed racial profiling to continue. Maya had already faced opposition in the form of the bank manager, Sharon Mitchell, but she knew there would be more. There would be more Sharon Mitchells, people who believed that the way things had always been was the way things should stay. Maya had always been a fighter. But now, she understood that the fight was bigger than she had ever imagined. The systems that perpetuated injustice were deeply ingrained. Changing them would take time, effort, and a lot of hard work. But Maya was ready for it. She knew that this wasn't just about making noise. It was about making a difference. It was about changing the way people thought, the way people acted, and the way people saw one another. As Maya sat down at her desk, drafting the outline for her first major campaign under Voices of Change, her phone buzzed. It was a message from her mother. "Maya, we need to talk. There's someone I want you to meet." Maya raised an eyebrow. Her mother didn't just send cryptic messages for no reason. She quickly responded. "Who?" "Someone who might be able to help you take Voices of Change to the next level. He's been working on racial justice initiatives for years. Trust me, you'll want to hear what he has to say." Maya felt a rush of excitement and curiosity. This was what she had been waiting for: guidance, mentorship, someone who could help her turn this movement into something more than just an online platform. Maya knew she needed to take the next step if she wanted her cause to gain traction, and this meeting could be exactly what she needed. The next day, Maya and Evelyn drove to a coffee shop across town. The streets were busy with people going about their daily lives, but Maya felt like everything had shifted in that moment. She wasn't just a kid anymore. She wasn't just a bystander in her own life. She was an advocate, a leader, and she was ready to step into her future. When they arrived, Maya was introduced to James Wright, a seasoned civil rights activist and advocate for racial justice. He had been working for years to create policies that would address racial inequality in both public and private sectors. James had heard about Maya's story and her growing movement, and he wanted to help. "You're doing important work," James said after they exchanged pleasantries. "But what you're tackling isn't something that changes overnight. You're up against a system that's been in place for generations. It's not just about raising awareness. It's about implementing real, sustainable change." Maya listened intently. She had known this wasn't going to be easy, but hearing it from someone with experience, someone who had been in the trenches for years, made it all the more real. James continued. "There are organizations already working toward racial justice, but they need fresh voices, fresh ideas. What you've done so far with Voices of Change is impressive, But now it's time to think about how you can make an impact on a national scale. How can you take this message and make it something that schools, businesses, and even lawmakers have to take seriously? Maya sat back in her chair, taking in his words. She had always known that her cause was about more than just her. It was about creating a movement. But hearing it from someone who had been working in this field for years made her realize how much work was still ahead. You're going to need resources, James said. You're going to need support from not just activists, but also people in power. People who can make decisions that change the way businesses operate, the way law enforcement behaves. You're going to have to push hard to get your message out there, and you'll need the right people backing you. Maya nodded, her mind racing with possibilities. She didn't just want Voices of Change to be an online community. She wanted to be a movement that would be taken seriously by the people who could make the biggest difference: politicians, business owners, and influential leaders. She wanted to push for laws that would hold businesses accountable for racial profiling. She wanted to create educational programs that would teach young people about their rights. She wanted to make sure that no one else had to go through what she had experienced. "Thank you," Maya said sincerely. "I don't know where to start, but I know I can't do it alone." James smiled. "And you won't, but we'll take it step by step. And together, we'll make sure your voice and the voices of so many others are heard." As Maya walked out of the coffee shop that day, she felt more confident than ever. She wasn't just some girl with an idea anymore. She was a leader, a voice for change, and with the help of people like James, she was about to make the kind of impact that would resonate for years to come. The road ahead would be difficult, but Maya was ready. She had fire inside her, and with every step, she would fight for the change she knew was possible. The meeting with James Wright had been a turning point for Maya. It wasn't just the advice and guidance he offered. It was a fire he reignited inside her. The reality of what she was about to undertake had fully hit her now. This wasn't going to be some simple social media campaign. This was going to be a movement, a real movement, a movement that could change the way people thought about justice, fairness, and race. For the first time, Maya understood the scope of what she was doing. She was stepping into something bigger than herself. She had ignited something that couldn't be ignored, and now she had to fuel that fire. And that meant going beyond the digital world, beyond the endless posts and hashtags. Maya needed to take the fight directly to those who could create real change: the policymakers, the business leaders, the educators, and the law enforcement agencies who had the power to reshape the system. She was sitting at the kitchen table with her mom, going over her notes and planning her next steps. The room was filled with papers, laptop open with multiple tabs on racial justice, equality, and policy reform. "Mom, I've been thinking a lot about what James said. This isn't just about telling people what happened to me. It's about making sure no one else goes through what I did," Maya said, her voice full of resolve. Evelyn nodded, understanding the gravity of what Maya was facing. "And it's going to take a lot of work, sweetheart. But I know you. You've got the heart, the courage, and the voice to make a difference. Now it's about building on that." Maya took a deep breath, the weight of it all sitting heavily in her chest. But she wasn't going to back down. If anything, the experiences of the last few weeks had shown her how deeply entrenched discrimination and racial profiling were in every aspect of life. It wasn't just about being denied an account at a bank. It was about the thousands of small, hurtful incidents that build up over time, the constant assumptions, the bias, the systemic barriers. She wasn't going to let that slide anymore. She was going to do something. "Okay," Maya said, looking up at her mom. "First things first. I need to get this platform running. Voices of Change has to be bigger. It needs a website, resources, a place where young people can come together, learn about their rights, and take action. We need legal experts, activists, and educators on board to help." Evelyn smiled, her eyes glinting with pride. "And we'll get it done, together. But Maya, you'll also need a team. You need people who share your vision and can help bring it to life. Don't try to do everything yourself." Maya nodded. Her mom was right. This couldn't be just her alone. The movement had to be about the collective voices of those who had been hurt, those who had been ignored. She needed others who shared her passion for justice, who could bring their expertise to help guide the way. The next few days were spent networking, meeting with different organizations, reaching out to activists and contacting lawyers who could help her put together a legal framework for the platform. Slowly but surely, Voices of Change started to take shape, evolving from just a social media campaign into a full-fledged movement that could not be ignored. She worked on drafting a mission statement, something that would clearly define the purpose of the movement. We stand for justice. We stand for equality. We stand for the rights of every person who has ever been made to feel less than. We believe in fairness, and we will fight for a world where discrimination, bias, and prejudice have no place. As the platform began to form, Maya realized that she needed to do more than just create a website. She needed to raise awareness on a national scale. She needed to take her story to the people who could make the most impact, the lawmakers, the CEOs, the people with the power to change policies, and the ones who could hold institutions accountable. Maya, are you sure you're ready for this? It was Evelyn again, looking at her daughter with concern, but also with that same unwavering support. Maya had just finished an interview with a local news station, one of many she had lined up to bring attention to her platform and the need for change. She was gaining traction, but Evelyn could see the toll it was starting to take on Maya. Maya paused and thought for a moment. She hadn't expected the pressure. She hadn't expected how hard it would be to juggle school, running the movement, and still having a normal life. But every time she opened her laptop and saw the messages flooding in, stories from people who had been treated unfairly, people who were inspired by her bravery, people who were standing up because of what she had started, she knew that this was where she was meant to be. "I'm ready, Mom," Maya said, her voice steady. "If not me, then who? If not now, when? I'm not backing down from this." Evelyn's face softened, and she gave Maya a proud, knowing smile. "I didn't raise you to back down from anything. I raised you to fight for what's right. And that's exactly what you're doing." It was a simple sentence, but it felt like the strongest affirmation of Maya's purpose. She wasn't alone. Her mom, the people around her, and a growing community of supporters were behind her. Maya wasn't just a teenager trying to make a difference. She was a symbol of hope, of resilience, and most importantly, of change. It's time for the world to see us. That was the message Maya sent out to her followers after everything started to fall into place. The website was launched, resources began rolling in, and the team of activists, legal experts, and educators began to form. Voices of Change wasn't just a platform anymore. It was a national conversation. Maya's next move was to take the fight directly to the institutions that had the power to change things. She started meeting with local legislators, speaking with CEOs of companies, and organizing public demonstrations and rallies. She even got the opportunity to speak at conferences on racial justice, where she was invited to talk about how young people could be a part of the solution to systemic inequality. Her voice was being heard. More importantly, her message was being taken seriously. Politicians were starting to listen, and businesses were starting to acknowledge that they had a responsibility to address the issue of racial profiling within their organizations. One evening, as she sat in the living room, looking through feedback on the movement's website, Maya realized something. She had started this journey feeling small, just a 13-year-old girl with a story. But now, she was leading a movement, and that movement was bigger than just her. It was a collective force, a powerful group of voices demanding justice. Maya's phone buzzed with a new message. "Your story is inspiring. We need more people like you. We're with you." Maya smiled. She wasn't just speaking for herself anymore. She was speaking for a generation. And together, they were going to change the world. Maya felt the weight of her mission settling heavily on her shoulders every day. But with each passing moment, she became more and more sure that she was exactly where she needed to be. Her voice had gained momentum, and Voices of Change was growing into something larger than she had ever imagined. The more people she reached out to, the more stories she heard, and the more she realized just how deeply the roots of racial injustice ran. It was a Tuesday afternoon when it finally hit her. The movement wasn't just about spreading awareness anymore. It was about creating systemic change. It was about dismantling the systems of inequality that had held so many people back for centuries. And it was going to take more than just social media posts and community rallies. Maya spent hours poring over articles, reports, and case studies about racial profiling, systemic bias, and a long history of discrimination that people of color faced in the United States. The stories she read made her heart ache. For every victory, there were countless stories of people who had been wronged, stories of lives ruined by prejudice, stories of children who never even had the chance to be treated fairly because of assumptions made based solely on how they looked. It was overwhelming, but it was also motivating. Maya knew she couldn't stop now. The next morning, she called Evelyn into her room. They sat down at the desk, paper strewn across the surface, laptop open to a list of potential contacts, experts, and organizations she could reach out to. It was time to take things to the next level. "I've been thinking, Mom," Maya started, her voice steady. "We can't just be about awareness anymore. We need to create tangible change, laws, policies, real accountability. We need to partner with politicians, law enforcement, even business leaders who can make a difference." Evelyn listened intently, her eyes focused on Maya. "I agree," she said quietly, "but that means we'll be up against a lot of resistance. People don't want to change. They're comfortable with the way things are." Maya nodded, her mind racing. She wasn't naive. She knew that the kind of change she wanted to see was going to require a long, hard fight. But the more she thought about it, the more she knew that this was the right path. She wasn't in this for the easy win. She was in this for justice, for change that would affect the next generation and the one after that, for everyone who had been ignored, hurt, or silenced. "Maya, you're going to need a plan," Evelyn said, her voice practical. "You need to be organized. Reach out to lawmakers, activists, and other organizations working on racial justice. Build alliances with people who can help you pass laws, put pressure on businesses, and change the way police departments operate." Maya thought about it for a moment. "I want to make sure that people know what to do when they face discrimination," she said finally. "I want to make sure that schools, businesses, and police officers are held accountable. And I want to make sure that no young person, no matter their race, feels like they're fighting this battle alone." With that, they set their plan into motion. A new mission. Maya spent the following weeks contacting everyone she could think of. She reached out to legal experts, activists, and even influencers who had been advocating for racial justice for years. She wanted voices of change to be a force for something bigger, a national platform for those affected by racial profiling and discrimination. Alongside the platform, Maya began drafting a proposal for a nationwide initiative aimed at tackling racial profiling in schools, businesses, and law enforcement. The proposal outlined several key areas of focus. Educational programs, aimed at teaching young people about their rights and how to stand up against racial profiling. Business accountability, a push for businesses to adopt anti-racial profiling policies and face consequences when those policies were violated. Law enforcement reform, a demand for police departments to implement racial bias training and establish clear accountability structures for officers who engage in racial profiling. She knew this wasn't going to be easy. There would be pushback and there would be roadblocks. But what gave Maya strength was the sheer volume of people who were ready to support the cause. Everywhere she went, she found allies, people who believed that the country could be better, fairer, and more just. One day, after a meeting with a local activist organization, Maya received an unexpected call from an elected official, Senator Lisa Harper. Harper had heard about Voices of Change and was intrigued by the work Maya was doing. She wanted to meet with her. When Maya arrived at the senator's office, she was nervous but also excited. Senator Harper had been a champion for racial justice reform in the state, and the thought of working with her to push for national change was both thrilling and intimidating. "Maya," Senator Harper said as they shook hands, "I've been following your work, and I'm deeply impressed by what you started. I think you have something incredibly important here, and I want to help." Maya sat down, her heart racing. This was it. This was the kind of opportunity she had been waiting for. Senator Harper continued, "What you're doing is not just raising awareness. This is about building real solutions. If you're serious about creating lasting change, I can help you get the attention of the right people." With that, Senator Harper became one of the first major allies to officially back Voices of Change. She offered to help Maya connect with other lawmakers, help her fine-tune her proposal, and even offered to introduce it to Congress. Making moves. Maya felt like everything was finally falling into place. With Senator Harper's help, voices of change gained momentum. More lawmakers began to take interest in her cause, and more organizations reached out to partner with her. Businesses that had been guilty of racial profiling were beginning to take notice, and some of them had started to reach out with apologies, asking how they could change their practices. Maya knew that the real work was just beginning, but it was the first sign of progress. She wasn't just another face in the crowd. She was a force for change. By the end of that year, Voices of Change had hosted its first national rally. It was a peaceful gathering with thousands of people showing up to demand accountability from lawmakers, businesses, and law enforcement. The energy was electric, and as Maya stood on stage, speaking to the crowd, she could feel the power of the movement that had grown around her. Maya realized in that moment that she wasn't just telling her story anymore. She was telling the story of everyone who had been discriminated against, everyone who had been ignored, everyone who had been told they didn't matter. And the world was finally starting to listen. The fight continues. But as Maya looked out over the crowd, she knew the fight wasn't over. In fact, it had only just begun. She had learned that change doesn't come easily. It takes time, patience, and persistence. There would be setbacks, challenges, and moments when it seemed like nothing was moving. But Maya also knew that her voice had power. And now, more than ever, she was ready to use it. She wasn't just standing up for herself anymore. She was standing up for every person who had ever been made to feel small, for every person who had ever been told they didn't belong, for every person who had been judged simply because of their skin color. And with that, Maya's resolve grew even stronger. She was going to see this through. She was going to change the world. Because when one voice rises, it has the power to change everything. Maya couldn't believe how far she had come. Just a few months ago, she had been a 13-year-old girl walking into Silverstone Bank with excitement, only to be humiliated and accused of stealing money she had rightfully earned. But now, standing at the podium in front of a crowd of thousands, Maya realized that what happened to her wasn't just a personal injustice. It was a reminder of a much larger, deeply entrenched problem. It was a wake-up call. Her story had become the catalyst for something much bigger than herself. Voices of Change had taken off, growing into a movement that spread like wildfire across the country. People who had been suffering in silence, people of color, young people, those who had been racially profiled, discriminated against, and marginalized, had started to find their voice through Maya's platform. But Maya knew that the real work had only just begun. This was just one step in a long journey to dismantle the systems that had allowed racial profiling and discrimination to thrive for so long. The rallies, the website, the partnerships with lawmakers and businesses, they were all pieces of a much larger puzzle. Maya had begun a fight for equality, one that would take time, persistence, and unwavering commitment. As Maya stood on that stage, looking out over the sea of faces, she couldn't help but reflect on how much she had learned. The journey hadn't been easy. She had faced doubts, fears, and countless moments of frustration. But it was in those moments that she had learned the most. She had learned that change isn't easy. It takes courage. It takes strength. And most of all, it takes people coming together to fight for something greater than themselves. Maya glanced down at the notes in her hand, but she didn't need them anymore. The words had come to her naturally. I started this journey because I thought what happened to me was an isolated incident, she began, her voice steady and filled with purpose. But I've learned that it's not. It's not just me. It's thousands of people who have been treated unfairly because of the color of their skin, the neighborhood they live in, or the way they look. It's time we stop pretending that this is okay. It's time we demand change. The crowd cheered, but Maya wasn't finished. Voices of Change isn't just a movement. It's a promise that we will no longer stand idly by. We will no longer let people of color be treated as criminals without cause. We will fight for the policies that protect our rights. We will make sure that every young person knows their worth and knows their rights. Maya paused, letting the words sink in. She knew this wasn't the end. This was just the beginning. She had gathered a coalition of activists, legal experts, and everyday people who were all working together to push for meaningful reforms. Voices of Change wasn't just a social media campaign. It was a call to action, a nationwide effort to ensure that racial profiling would no longer be tolerated, and that young people, especially those from marginalized communities, would have the tools and support to stand up for themselves. Her platform had started small, just a few stories shared online, but now it was a driving force for policy change. Her first big win was partnering with lawmakers who had pledged to pass new bills requiring racial bias training for police officers and mandating that businesses put clear anti-racial profiling policies in place. Maya had learned that real change didn't just come from protesting or making noise. It came from working with a system to fix it. But that wasn't enough. Maya wasn't just waiting for laws to change. She wanted to see a shift in how people thought, how they acted, how they saw each other. She wanted the next generation to grow up in a world where their skin color didn't determine how they were treated. She wanted a world where every child, no matter where they came from, could walk into a bank, a school, a store, and be treated with respect. And so, Maya continued her work, using Voices of Change as a platform to push for more resources, more education, and more opportunity for young people to get involved in fighting for racial justice. She knew it wouldn't be easy. There would be more setbacks, more challenges, and more moments where it seemed like nothing was changing. But she had learned one invaluable lesson. Change was hard, but it was possible. As she left the stage that day, Maya felt the weight of what lay ahead. The road to true equality was long and difficult, but she also felt something else, a sense of hope. Hope that the voices of young people, of those who have been wronged, of those who refuse to be silent, would carry them forward. Hope that they were starting something that would not only change the future, but change the present. Maya wasn't just fighting for herself anymore. She was fighting for every child who was looked at the way she was looked at in that bank. She was fighting for every parent who had to explain to their child why the world wasn't fair. She was fighting for the people who didn't know where to start, but were now finding their voice through Voices of Change. The fight was far from over. But Maya knew one thing for certain. They were winning. Step by step, story by story, person by person, they were creating a future where everyone could stand tall, be proud, and never again be judged by the color of their skin. And that, Maya realized, was only the beginning.